Attorney General, you've told us that it's a dangerous conspiracy theory to allege that the Department of Justice is communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump. You can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fonnie Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about. Now, you were a judge, once nominated the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No.
No, and you didn't because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't because there's a federal rule barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that same theory of attacks on the judicial process, like, shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction which has to be respected. I won't comment on it. That case is still ongoing. The defendant
Mr. Attorney General, I hadn't asked you about the verdict yet. We were getting there. I was talking about the judge. And so let me ask you this question about your time as a judge. Was there ever a time when you were a judge when you had a family member who was personally profiting off of the notoriety of a case that was before your court?
Look, I'm going to say again, it's very clear you're asking me to comment on a case in another jurisdiction.
No, wait, hold on, Mr. Attorney General. Did you ever have a family member profit off of the notoriety of any case that you sat over?
Say again, you're asking
yes or no?
You're asking me to comment on a case currently.
Well, it seems you're connecting the dots, Mr. Attorney General. I'm just asking you as to a general principle, but you are aware that Judge Merchan's daughter was profiting off of this prosecution. You are aware that that creates the appearance of impropriety. You know the very reason there's a federal rule against judges giving donations is because it is the very attack on the judicial process that we're concerned about.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with anything you just said, but I'm not going to comment on it.
Okay, so you won't comment on it, Mr. Attorney General, but you had no problem dispatching Matthew Colangelo. Who's Matthew Colangelo?
That is false. I did not dispatch Matthew Colangelo.
Matthew Colangelo became the Assistant Attorney General at the very beginning of the Biden administration. Without having been Senate confirmed, goes and gets this senior role at the DOJ, and then after, I believe it's Gupta replaces Colangelo, Colangelo makes this remarkable downstream career journey from the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then pops up in Alvin Bragg's office to go get Trump. And you're saying that's just a career choice that was made that has nothing to do with the lawfare coordinated by the DOJ.
I'm saying it's false. I did not dispatch Mr. Colangelo anywhere.
Well, do you know how he ended up there?
I assume he applied for a job there and got the job.
But see, you know what?
I can tell you I had nothing to do with it.
Well, you might not have had anything to do with it, but we've got this contemporaneous evidence in Mr. Pomerantz's book. So Pomerantz writes this book, which I'm sure you're aware of, where he says, we put together the legal eagles to get Trump. We got all these folks together and we assembled them for that purpose. And so when we on the Judiciary Committee think about attacks on the judicial process, our concern is that the facts and the law aren't being followed. A target is acquired, here, Trump, and then you assemble the legal talent from DOJ, Mr. Pomerantz, and you bring everybody in to get him. And meanwhile, the judge is making money on it. The judge is making money on it, or the judge's family is making money on it for stuff that you yourself wouldn't do. You know, no one's going to buy this. No one's going to believe it. It's going to create great disruption. And I am saddened by it because, like you, I have given my life to the law. I care deeply about the law. And I think that the lawfare we've seen against President Trump will do great damage well beyond our time in public service. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Garland, why Jack Smith? Why'd you pick him?
Well, I've said at the time I appointed Mr. Smith, I explained he was independent. He was a longtime career prosecutor
But there are probably other people who you would describe as independent, long-time career prosecutor. Why did you pick, this is probably the most high-profile special counsel investigation, maybe in American history. You're going to be investigating a former president, a candidate for president, and leading in all the polls, and you pick Jack Smith, most important selection maybe ever made from Attorney General when you come to a special counsel. I just want to know why you could have picked former AGs, deputy AGs, U.S. attorneys. You got all kinds of lawyers in this town, but you picked Jack Smith.
All the people you just mentioned would be political appointees. I appointed somebody who was not a political appointee, somebody who was independent, nonpartisan, with a record of career experience as a prosecutor. That seemed to me the perfect resume for making that kind of.
He was a guy, worked, you had to bring him back from Europe. He worked at the ICC, worked at the World Court. He was the best pick for the most high-profile investigation ever.
He was independent. He was nonpartisan. He had never held a political office. He was never appointed in a political office.
Was he your first choice?
He had a long career as a career prosecutor.
Was he your first choice?
I'm not going to go into the questions.
Did you know him before you picked him?
I did not.
You never worked with him?
I did not.
Did you meet with him prior to announcing his selection and tell him what was going on?
Of course I did.
What happened in that meeting?
I met with him. I asked him if he would be willing to do this. We talked about my understandings of the role of this office, which are on the public record. That's all.
Did he ask for the job?
This was not a job I don't think anybody asks for. I'm sorry.
No, but that's not the question I asked you. I said, did Jack Smith ask for the job?
He did not ask me for the job, no.
Did he convey through someone else that he wanted the job?
I would be surprised if that were the case, but
you don't know?
No, I don't know.
So he may have?
I can only tell you what I know. I chose him because he had a record of impartial career experience as a prosecutor. That's why he was chosen.
Was it impartial when he went after Governor McDonnell?
He was a member of the...
He was after Governor McDonnell. That case gets appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court unanimously said it was wrong and overturns the conviction?
He was in the public integrity section of the Justice Department, a career position. They made the decisions they thought were warranted, and we respect the decision of the Supreme Court.
Did the fact that he was interested in going after the very people who were targeted by the IRS about a decade ago, did that have any influence on your selection? Okay, let's put up this slide here. This is from Jack Smith to some other folks in the Justice Department, and it says, could we ever charge a conspiracy to violate laws of the U.S. for misuse of such nonprofits to get around existing campaign finance laws? Jack Smith was looking to prosecute the very people who were targeted by the Obama IRS.
I don't know. You have excerpts from an email I've never seen. You should know that
IRS Commissioner Sarah, I'm just asking this way into your decision. Did you know about this?
No,
what Jack Smith was trying to do?
I also don't know if it's true now.
IRS Commissioner Sarah Ingram oversees this from Jack Smith himself. Let's discuss tomorrow, but maybe we should try to set up a meeting this week. And here's the response. Here's the response. You didn't get your meeting with Miss Ingram from the IRS, but she's sending the head of the exempt organizations, Lois Lerner, who's known to us. So Jack Smith meeting with Lois Lerner, looking for ways to prosecute the very people who were victims of the Obama IRS. And I'm just asking, did that factor in your decision to name Jack Smith as special counsel?
I didn't have any idea about the things.
Didn't know about that?
No, and I don't know whether they're true now by looking at this.
Well, they're definitely true, but you didn't know about it. But this guy was so important, you have to bring him from Europe back here to go after President Trump, name him as a special counsel. Do you regret the pick?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Do you regret picking him?
No, I do not regret picking him.
Well, prosecutors aren't supposed to tamper with evidence, and it looks like that's what he did. He changed the sequence of the documents that he seized from Mar-a-Lago.
I'm sorry, that's a false characterization, but that is ongoing.
Here's what he said to the court, Mr. Attorney General. There are some boxes where the order of items within the box is not the same as in the associated scans. I mean, he said it. I didn't say it. He told the court that.
Now you're asking me to comment on a discovery dispute that's ongoing in a court. I don't know the facts of it, and I'm not going to comment on it.
No, this is from Jack Smith filing with the court. He admitted to the court that they tamper with the evidence. He mishandled the very documents he's charging President Trump with mishandling. And I'm just asking, do you regret picking this guy as the special counsel in the most important special counsel investigation probably in American history?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the words tamper in the statement that Mr. Smith filed. He did not use those words.
Well, let me ask it this way. Are you supposed to change the order of the documents that you seize and the physical documents don't match up with the scanned documents? Are you supposed to do that as a prosecutor?
This is a matter in dispute, in discovery in that court, and I'm going to leave it for the district court to make a determination. After
I would just say one last thing. It's not in dispute. This is what he said in the court filing. Jack Smith's team said that to the judge in the court. By the way, this case is now basically on hold because they've screwed up so many things.
Again, I don't know whether your description of the facts are true or not true, and I'm not going to intrude in a decision in a district court.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Before anyone else on the other side saddles up and gets on their high legal horses, I just want to remind the committee that the chairman is 754 days into his own subpoena defiance. Mr. Attorney General, last week it was reported that House Ethics Panel subpoenas DOJ for Gates records. It was a May 14, 2024 political piece. I'd like to submit it to the record with unanimous consent.
Without objection.
I just want to get this straight. Mr. Gates wants the Attorney General to reopen and publicize evidence from an investigation that a Donald Trump-appointed prosecutor closed against President Biden, while at the same time, Mr. Gates himself is being protected by the same DOJ policy that is refusing to voluntarily turn over evidence from Mr. Gates's sex trafficking investigation. Mr. Attorney General, can you just briefly, without going into the facts of that case, address why that is the DOJ policy as it relates to the current president and any other requests about closed investigations?
Yeah, without referencing any case, we try to protect the law enforcement files of the Justice Department so that in future investigations, people are willing to cooperate with us. We understand Congress's concerns, and we have an obligation to assess whether the information that we've provided is sufficient to accommodate the legitimate needs of the Congress. All of the reasons that Congress has given us for why they need the audio are satisfied with respect to the tapes. That is, all of the legitimate reasons given, the reasons that relate to legislative work of the committee. As to that, we've accommodated by providing the audio. We provided Mr. Herr's testimony in full, and we've provided Mr. Herr's testimony report. We've gone as far as we can go to accommodate. We're trying to protect our ability to do investigations in this case and in any other case.
Mr. Attorney General, let's set the facts straight here. And my job is to kind of lead an intervention for my colleagues. I think they need it. The Attorney General did not prosecute Donald Trump in New York. It was the result of Donald Trump's choices. Donald Trump chose to live in New York. He chose to commit his crimes in New York. He was afforded a right to be tried by his neighbors, jurors, in New York. He chose that jury in New York, working with his counsel, and they chose to make him a 34-time over convicted felon. But some of the choices the department has made in the recent years is that the president that was first appointed, that Donald Trump appointed the U.S. attorney who is investigating the current president's son. Donald Trump appointed John Durham, who investigated the wild claims made by this committee during the Russia investigation. And Donald Trump appointed Robert Hur, who was kept on by the Biden administration. Also, you have the right in our country to aid yourself in your own defense and talk to investigators. You also have a right not to. Mr. Attorney General, did Donald Trump sit down for an interview in the Mueller investigation?
I actually don't know, but I'm not going to comment on other investigations.
He didn't. Did he sit down for an interview with investigators prior to the January 6th indictment?
I'm not going to comment on
He didn't. He also didn't sit down for an interview with investigators in the classified materials indictment, but President Biden did sit down for a voluntary interview with Robert Hur. A jury can't hold it against Donald Trump that he did not testify in his own defense in New York, but he promised everyone else in the country that he would. You can hold it against Donald Trump that he did not testify when you consider whether you should so blindly follow every wild claim that he makes. My colleagues, none of this today that you are bringing makes sense. Your inconsistencies, your hypocrisy, your sycophancy, unless you are in a cult. And guys, I'm starting to think you're in a cult. That is your right, but it's not your responsibility. I promise you that's not what your constituents would want. So if you believe in states' rights, except when a jury in that state convicts your nominee for president, you might be in a cult. If you claim you back the blue but want to defund the police when the police go to your nominee's house to retrieve national security secrets, you might be in a cult. If you're supporting a guy whose felony convictions prevent him from getting a security clearance, you might be in a cult. And if the guy you're supporting for president has felony convictions that prevent him from going to Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Cambodia, Canada, Chile, China, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Egypt, Ethiopia, Hong Kong,
my motion
India,
takes precedent.
Indonesia, Iran, Ireland, Israel, Japan, Kenya, Macau, Malaysia, Mexico, Morocco, Nepal, New Zealand, Peru, Philippines, Singapore, South Africa, South Korea, Taiwan, Tanzania, Tunisia, Turkey, Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, and the UK,
the gentleman from
in a cult.
Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes. I'm asking the gentleman.
I have unanimous consent request.
Gentleman has unanimous consent request.
I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an amicus brief by the former Attorney General Edwin Meese.
Without objection.
The question presented is whether private citizen Jack Smith lacks authority to represent the United States. I also ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an article titled, "Was it legal to appoint Jack Smith in the first place?" This is a Heritage publication.
Without objection.
I want to start by reading you the appointment clause of the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 6 states, "The President shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States, whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law." Are U.S. attorneys nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate according to this appointments clause?
They are appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate.
Wouldn't you agree that U.S. attorneys are held to the appointments clause because they are delegated some part of the sovereign power of the United States, such as the ability to make indictments and charge individuals with crimes?
I would say that those are not the reasons why, and a court has already ruled on the question of whether special counsels are subject to the appointments clause in the Mueller case, and ruled that they were not. Was
Jack Smith nominated by President Biden or confirmed by the U.S. Senate?
Look, you're asking me about a case, again, motions filed as just
This
cited
is a simple question.
No, I'm not
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden?
No, he was not.
Was he confirmed by the Senate?
No, he was not.
When was the special counsel statute passed?
There is no special counsel statute. There was an independent counsel statute that was expired.
So it expired. So what gives you the authority to appoint a special counsel? You've created an office in the U.S. government that does not exist without authorization from Congress.
There are regulations under which the Attorney General appoints special counsel. They've been in effect for 30 years, maybe longer, under both parties. The matter that you're talking about whether somebody can have an employee of the Justice Department serve as special counsel has been adjudicated.
You appealed, let me interrupt for a second, because you appealed to a regulation, a rule, whereas the Constitution says shall be established by law.
Yeah, the statutes.
Right, the statute, but you referred to a regulation, not to U.S. code.
May I answer? The regulation cites the two U.S. Code provisions that permit the Attorney General's appointment. Attorney General Barr cited to the same ones.
Are you familiar?
Even Attorney General Meese did that.
All right. Are you familiar with former Attorney General Meese's amicus brief?
No.
You're not?
I know that he's filed one because I read it in the newspapers, but otherwise I'm not familiar with it. But
well, he raises some good questions that I agree with in there. It seems like you've created an office that would require an act of Congress, yet there's not an act of Congress that authorizes that. And even if it didn't require an act of Congress, and you've already admitted it, there was no act of Congress that established this office, it would still require, according to the Constitution, a nomination by the president and confirmation by the Senate. I want to move on to January 6th. Is it accurate to say that the DOJ is on pace to arrest roughly one protester a day in 2024, nearly 3 years after the incident?
I don't know what the pace is. The job is to arrest and bring to justice people who are criminally responsible, and as they are found, they will be arrested.
Is your office preparing to drop charges against more than 340 January 6thers charged with 1512C2 and release dozens from prison on that count if the Supreme Court this month reverses how your department has used that statute against them?
We respect the Supreme Court. Whatever the court rules, we will act appropriately.
So you'll have to drop the charges if the Supreme Court says that you did that wrongfully.
I'm not going to answer hypotheticals. We'll wait and see what the Supreme Court says.
What do you say in response to D.C. Appellate Court overturning 2 excessive sentencing requests sought by your office?
I say that is the United States system of justice working. If people think that they have inappropriate sentences, they can appeal their sentences. That's the way our system works, and we respect the results.
So you've refused to answer questions before us, including my questions about January 6th on multiple occasions here in this committee, but the Inspector General is preparing a report. Are you in receipt of that report yet? He's promised to examine the role and activity of DOJ and its components in preparing for and responding to the events at the U.S. Capitol. Are you in receipt of that?
I'm not in receipt of any report. You'll have to ask the Inspector General.
Isn't it true that it will go to you before it's released for review?
I don't know about it will not go to me for review. The Inspector General is independent. I hope to see it before, but that's up to the Inspector General. Let me just remind you, I was not the Attorney General on January 6th.
Do we have your commitment to release that as soon as you see it?
The determination of the release of Inspector General reports is up to the Inspector General. We give them independence. Congress demands that we give them independence.
My time has expired, but we have your commitment not to slow down the release of that from the Inspector General.
Our Inspector General is a very independent person. There's no way I could stop him from doing what the law requires.
I yield back.
And I would certainly never do that.
Gentleman yields back. Would that work? All right, the gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for appearing before the Judiciary Committee. I read a report recently that the D.C. United States Attorney's Office had only devoted 5% of resources to January 6th prosecutions. But I've also understand from many conversations that the most or all of the United States U.S. Attorney districts contributed an AUSA or an investigator to the effort. Can you confirm whether the department across the board has been providing additional support from other U.S. attorneys' offices in terms of AUSAs or investigators contributing for the January 6th investigations?
Yes, that's true, and that began before I became Attorney General. That continued after I became Attorney General.
So multiple resources across the department have been devoted to that effort, including other districts?
Yes,
okay.
Because of the significance of an attack on democracy in this body.
The reason I'm asking about that is in terms of the focus of the resources of the department. If staff would put up on the screen, there's a number of people here that I want to see if you can identify who they are. What we have here in the bottom right-hand corner is a woman named Lizbeth Medina. She was found dead in a bathtub in Texas. Her mom found her, hoping to see her in a parade that night. She was killed by Rafael Govea Romero, who was here illegally. On the bottom left-hand corner, you have Laken Riley. She was killed by 26-year-old Jose Ibarra, arrested by U.S. Customs and Border Protection after he unlawfully entered the United States near El Paso, Texas. Up above, you have officers Richard Uruso, 26, and Officer Christopher Abreu, 26. Both were shot this last weekend by Bernardo Raul Castro Mata, a 19-year-old Venezuelan national apprehended by U.S. Border Patrol after he unlawfully entered the United States near Eagle Pass in July of 2023. What we have is a continued effort by the federal government to fail to secure the border of the United States, and Americans are dying or getting shot. In this case, law enforcement getting shot, 2 young women who are dead. My question for you with respect to the department is, do you believe that Texas has a right to defend itself and to ensure that people who are in this country are not here illegally, and that we can protect the citizens of Texas from people unlawfully here who are committing crimes to Lizbeth Medina, who's no longer with us because the federal government refused to do its job. Yet the Department of Justice is suing the state of Texas to stop implementation of SB 4. So do you say, as the Attorney General of the United States, Texas does not have a right to defend itself and to protect our citizens from murder by people who have come here illegally into the United States?
I say, as the Attorney General and as a human being, that my heart goes out to the families, that these are terrible, terrible events. And I say, secondly, as the Attorney General, the way to stop people like this from coming into the United States is to give more resources to the Border Patrol so that they can prevent
Mr. Attorney General, no. No.
You don't want to
we the people of Texas, money's not going to solve the problem when the Department of Homeland Security and the President of the United States refuse to enforce the law, ignore the policies, and Lizbeth Medina would be here alive today if we were following the law. Lake and Riley would be here today if we had not released a killer onto the streets of the United States of America through parole policies that this administration is advancing. And the Department of Justice is suing the state of Texas in court, taking valuable resources to go against the people of Texas when Texas simply wants to say that we should have a say in stopping people who are illegally, arrest them, and be able to deal with that on our own terms when the federal government refuses to do its job.
As reflected in our filings in that case, we are in court because the United States Supreme Court in Arizona versus the United States held that states cannot adopt their own immigration.
You're in court because you're choosing to try to stop Texas from enforcing the laws that the federal government is refusing to enforce. And by the way, that's not the same thing as Arizona. But a final question in my last minute. The Department of Justice did not assert privilege with regard to the transcript, correct?
That's right.
And you articulated a minute ago to my colleague that the best evidence rule says that the transcribed copy is admissible, right? But how can you claim privilege in the face of not just a legislative inquiry, but a constitutional impeachment inquiry? How can you claim privilege for something that you just testified was effectively the same thing? How can you claim privilege for the audio of the transcript you just testified was the same?
I just testified the words are the same. Sensing an audio is different. You have not given any explanation, and there's nothing in the impeachment resolution that would make a difference with respect to audio.
I respectfully disagree. I would ask you one last question. Is the decision not to prosecute President Biden for effectively the same crime for which DOJ is prosecuting President Trump, is it because DOJ has determined the president is not mentally fit to defend himself and stand trial for his crime, but former President Trump is?
I say again, that's an inaccurate description of Mr. Herr's report, and I would rest on Mr. Herr's report.
It's the only assertion he made. I yield back.
Yield the remainder of my time to the chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Is the Department of Justice retaliating against whistleblowers?
No, that would be a violation of statute and a violation of
The
our...
Inspector General seems to think you are. I got this management advisory memorandum dated May 2024, notification of concerns regarding the Department of Justice compliance with whistleblower protections for employees with a security clearance.
I've read the management memo. I think it's a good memo. It doesn't say we've been retaliated against anybody. It says that there have to be additional protections with respect.
Is it just pure coincidence that Marcus Allen's security clearance got reinstated today? Whistleblower came in front of this committee. Democrats disparaged this guy, called him a conspiracy theorist. 27 months without his security clearance, and we find out today it's been reinstated?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know about the facts, anything about the facts of that case. Retaliation against whistleblowers is against the law, and it will be punished.
3 people who've come and talked to this committee as whistleblowers have had their security clearance taken. Marcus Allen gets his security clearance put back in place today. And the Inspector General says he's got concerns, doing an investigation as we speak about what's going on. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to gentleman from
I appreciate the gentlelady yielding. A news story last week in Politico, first paragraph. The Justice Department has agreed to settle long-running litigation stemming from a decision in 2017 to release to the media text messages between 2 former FBI employees involved in the probe of Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Are Peter Strzok and Lisa Page going to get a windfall of American tax dollars soon here, Mr. Attorney General?
I'm sorry, I either didn't hear or didn't understand the question.
Are Peter Strzok and Lisa Page going to get a windfall of American tax dollars?
I'm sorry.
Are you in the settlement negotiations with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page?
Oh, I don't know what's public in that respect or not.
I'm reading from the story. Someone gave it to him. I assume it was you guys. Justice Department has agreed to a long-running litigation stemming from a decision in 2017.
I don't know whether discussions are public or not. In every case, when people bring cases against the United States, we attempt to settle the case.
Simple question. Are Lisa Page and Peter Strzok going to get money from the American taxpayer?
When that determination is made about whether settlement is made in that case, it will be announced.
You're back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, do you agree that yours and my job is to protect constitutional rights of Americans?
Yes, that's the easy one to agree with.
Okay, that's at least we agree in substance, so let's just go a little bit through the rights. And I want to explain to you how a lot of Americans in my district, in my observation or interested observation, do not trust and believe so. And this is an interesting observation. I've noticed that, you know, a lot of people, when they come with cases and they say FBI showed up to my house, ATF showed up to my house, never showed up before, law-abiding citizens. When I ask them, were you in DC on January 6th? Strangely enough, a lot of these people usually say yes. And that is really looks very suspicious to me. But let's just talk about our amendments. Do you believe under the Second Amendment there should be, do you agree, no restriction on the quantity of gun that any law-abiding citizen should own? I'm not talking about types. I can own 5 guns, 500, or 5,000. Do you believe there should be no limitations on quantity of guns?
No limitations on what?
On the quantity, on number. 500 or 5,000 guns that I can own.
On the number of guns that people can purchase?
Yeah, for my collection.
I don't think there's any statutory.
Yeah, so there is no limitation. So you agree with that, right? So if I have as many guns as I want, you know, in my personal collection, do you think, you know, you have this new rule that you celebrated with your ATF director, which I think is very dangerous. Do you think there should be limitations on percentage of my collections that I should be able to sell, or time frame I can hold a gun? Like, you know, I could buy 10 guns and try to shoot them in the range, they're not good, and I went and sold them. Should be there any limitations on the time frame or percentage of how much of my collections I can replace?
There's an exception in the statute for sales from personal collections.
So I can do as many. I can sell 500 guns, so it shouldn't be a problem, right? If I want to, if it happens that it's, you know, I just want to replace.
All I can say is there's an exception in the statute and the regulations with respect to sales from personal collections. I don't know the answer to the question about percentages.
Well, it would be good because American people would like to know the answer, because this creates a lot of dangers, and we'll follow up with the latter because, you know, this is called destroy people's life, and we already had this situation that happened in Arkansas. But then another, on the First Amendment, do you think people had the right to be here on January 6th of 21? You know, if they didn't want to do anything bad, they just be here in Washington, D.C. Do you think it's a constitutional right for people to be here?
Yes, people have a constitutional right to be in Washington, D.C.
That's right. So you have, how many Americans did you charge at Section 1512C2, obstruction of justice, and convicted?
I don't know the answer, but it's listed on the web page.
Yeah, so it's several hundred, a lot of people. Why this section was legislated? Do you know when the Section 1512C2, what is the reason that the section was legislated?
It has to do with obstruction of a...
No, it didn't have to do. You should know legal history, right? When it was legislated and why.
Okay. You're asking me a question the Supreme Court's about to rule on.
So the history, this section was legislated for Sarbanes-Oxley with Enron situation to deal with a situation that happened on the financial crimes, right? And actually, the title is tampering with a witness, victim, and informant. Is that correct? You agree with that?
We can have a long discussion on the
Not a discussion, it's just the fact, the historic fact, when it was broad and ambiguous, but that's what was legislated.
The text of the statute does not make the limitation you're saying. All of this has been argued in the
So,
Supreme Court.
it's argued. And if your interpretation is wrong under Supreme Court, and Supreme Court is going to reverse this decision, do you have a plan? What are you going to do with all of these people that potentially wrongfully was charged? Do you have a plan?
Our plan is that we will follow the law that the Supreme Court tells us. We don't know yet what the Supreme Court will say. I can assure you we will follow what the Supreme Court says.
Well, but your ambiguous interpretation destroys people's life. I yield back.
I'm going to go back to where I was, Mr. Attorney General, a few minutes ago. I want to read from this Politico's news story from 1 week ago today. I just want to read two sentences. It's the first two sentences in the article. The Justice Department has agreed to settle a long-running litigation stemming from a decision in 2017 to release to the media text messages between two former FBI employees involved in the probe of Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Next sentence. In a notice filed with two federal judges in Washington on Tuesday, the Justice Department said it had reached settlements of legal claims that fired FBI agent Peter Strzok and former FBI attorney Lisa Page brought in 2019, alleging that the disclosure violated their privacy. So again, I just want to be clear that the department is getting ready to pay Peter Strzok and Lisa Page some money. Is that accurate?
I wasn't aware that we'd announced it. All I can say is we reached settlements based on our litigators' assessment of whether we can win the case and how much it will cost if we lose the case. That's the way we decide on reaching settlements.
Just to be clear, the guy who texted Peter Strzok, who was involved in the spying on President Trump's campaign, who was then involved, worked on the Mueller investigative team, and sent this text message to Lisa Page, just went to a Southern Virginia Walmart. I could smell, in all capitals, I could smell the Trump support. That guy's going to get tax dollars from the American people?
That case is he brought a case under the Privacy Act. The question is, did the Justice Department violate the Privacy Act?
Lisa Page said this in a text message to Peter Strzok. Trump's not ever going to become president, right? With a question mark. Peter Strzok's response, no, he's not. We'll stop it. And these two individuals are going to get a windfall of money from the American taxpayers because you decided that's the right thing to do?
The Privacy Act doesn't distinguish between people we like and people we don't like, information we like and information we don't like. If somebody in the government discloses personal information protected by the Privacy Act, that's the way the law is.
Jeepers, you can go after a president and you get rewarded for doing so, according to the Justice Department.
It's not a question of reward, it's a question of the government paying for violating the law.
They're going to get a lot of money, and I know that this is what they said. We know what they were up to. Generally from Wyoming is recognized.
Mr. Attorney General, are you above reproach?
I'm not above criticism. I'm not sure what you mean by reproach, but of course you're totally free to criticize me, and I expect
Yeah, as
you will.
American citizens, we can criticize you. We can criticize all of our government employees, can't we?
Absolutely.
Because you've seemed to whine quite a bit today about being attacked or people challenging the decisions that you've made. I actually think that Daniel Greenfield, a contributor to Front Page Magazine, may have said it best when he said that a justice system can survive those who challenge the prosecutors, but it can't survive those who prosecute the challengers, which is kind of the situation we're in with the Biden administration and you at the helm of the Attorney General's office. Attorney General Garland, in March, Chairman Jordan and I sent you an oversight letter requesting documents and information following the release of an undercover video indicating that the DOJ was working with the IRS to use artificial intelligence to surveil bank accounts of Americans in a clearly unconstitutional manner. The undercover video featured an IRS official privately admitting that the IRS had been using AI to spy on Americans' bank accounts en masse in real time. The IRS official further stated that the Department of Justice and Inspector General controlled this AI-powered warrantless surveillance system, not the IRS. Attorney General, would you agree with me that if the federal government were operating this form of financial surveillance program, there would be serious Fourth Amendment as well as other statutory and civil rights implications, considering that there is no individual probable cause and no search warrants are being obtained?
I would be stunned if the Justice Department has the kind of AI capabilities that you're talking about.
Would you agree with me that
would you agree with me to learn about this?
Would you agree with me that if they were engaging in that kind of surveillance, it would have serious Fourth Amendment implications?
I can't understand the kind of surveillance that you're talking about. Fourth Amendment prevents unreasonable searches and seizures without a warrant. If that's what we're doing, then of course that would violate the Fourth Amendment.
So I would request that you go back and read the letter that Jim Jordan and I sent to you. That might clear up your confusion just a bit.
I'll be happy to do
Now, while the committee has been following up with the department about this matter for months now, the department only replied with a formal response to the committee late last week. In the department's response letter, a DOJ spokesman, the Assistant Attorney General Carlos Iriarte, stated that the department is, quote, not aware of the department using any AI program that reflects the description in our March 20th letter, end quote. But saying that the chief AI officer is, quote, not aware of the department coordinating with the IRS to use AI to unconstitutionally spy on Americans' financial records is very different from saying unequivocally that the department is not doing so. Why won't the department just give us a clear answer as to whether it is actually using AI to spy on American citizens' financial records?
I'll be happy to take your letter back, and apparently you already have received a letter. I'll take it back, and we'll see whether we can get you a clearer letter for you.
I would appreciate that. I want to turn to another serious issue, the infiltration of our tribal communities by the Mexican cartels because of Joe Biden and Mayorkas's open border. As chair of the Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs, I have heard from tribes across the nation about this issue. In your written testimony, you actually mention how the department is working with tribal partners to disrupt cartel supply chains and that the department is zeroing in on the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels. However, in April, the president of the Fort Belknap Indian community testified to the department's failures, stating, quote, "We don't have help from the FBI, the Border Patrol, the DEA, that has jurisdiction on federal lands, which are reservations." Attorney General Garland, his testimony comes from a tribe where the Sinaloa cartel operates with near impunity in its region. Drugs have devastated the community, reservations have become part of the cartel supply chain, and the Mexican cartels are intimidating Americans testifying before Congress. Yet the FBI and DOJ are largely absent. The tribe's experience runs in direct contrast to your testimony. Have you been in contact with any of our tribes about the impact that mass illegal immigration, human trafficking, and drug smuggling are having on their members?
Not only have I been in contact with the tribes, I've been on the reservation in Montana and Alaska. The answer to your question is Congress is not giving us money for FBI agents to go into the reservations.
So this is Congress's fault that you won't do your job.
It's Congress's
This
fault.
is Congress's fault that you won't protect
I will do
our
my-
reservation, that you won't protect our reservations from the consequences of the Biden and Mayorkas open border policies. That's Congress's fault, not theirs.
If you give us money for more FBI
Oh, you
agents
need more
for the
money for FBI
reservations,
agents.
they
How
will
about
go
if
to the
they just
reservation.
enforce the border? How about if you ask them to enforce the border?
The time of the gentlelady has expired.